As we look at the world today, as we look at America, we are dealing with a situation where the leaders sometimes do not reflect the best interest of all our communities, of all our people. And the on purpose leader should have enough cultural competency to see that we all want to be loved and treated with respect. Welcome to the On Purpose Leader podcast. My name is Charles Clemons, and I'm your host. I'm excited to be with you today. And the On Purpose Leader podcast is designed for the emerging leader, the individuals who's just starting out, maybe in career, profession, becoming the leader of a new department or business, or maybe the established leader that's seeking to really refine skill sets, develop soft skills, to have more of a cutting edge. As together we're facing unusual times. We are facing times that present opportunities for growth and for development. And so the On Purpose Leader podcast is really designed for the leader who wants to lead with greater intention, vision, and values. And let me talk to you a little bit about this sense of intention, vision, and values. When I was a kid, one of my sisters, I had three big sisters, and one in particular that we would play a lot with, her name was Charlene. And so we played dodgeball, we played kickball, we played tag, and we'd rough it up a little bit. But if one of us got hurt or started to push and shove, we would eventually turn and look at the other and say, hey, you did that on purpose. And we repeat that, oh, you did that on purpose. And maybe your home was like that, or maybe you remember saying a phrase like that you did this on purpose. Well, I think we can agree that sometimes people hurt others on purpose, with intent and with a clear vision of what they wanted to do. Well, here's the thing. Positively, being an on-purpose leader means that you're actually thinking about how to make things better for those that you lead, how to grow and develop personally so that those who are in your area of influence might experience a greater you. Let's look at it this way. The on-purpose leader who's clear on what their intentions are, clear on their own core values and what are those non-negotiables about who they are and where they work, and then has an eye on a where to go vision. That person can work and do things on purpose. And we need more of that. And so I'm excited that the On Purpose Leader podcast is going to give you an opportunity to look at conversations with leaders across business, across nonprofit spaces, education, the arts. I'll have the privilege, and you along with me, we're going to have discussions and interviews with people who are on purpose leaders, and I'm excited about it. And this being our first episode, today is really just an intro to it. And I'll share a bit of my story, like who is this Charles Clemons and why should I be listening? And I'll share a bit of my journey as an on-purpose leader. And then following that, we'll walk through those 11 weeks of those episodes of what you can expect so that each week as you tune in, you'll have something to build upon. Kind of like tools in a tool belt, if you will, or a tool chest. Each week we'll cover topics such as the purpose-driven leader, the community impact leader, one with an entrepreneurial mindset, personal growth, legacy building, the leader who's ethical leadership, mentorship, innovation and adaptability, social responsibility as a leader, holistic wellness, the leader with cultural competence, because, not everybody's all the same, right? And then the visionary thinking leader. These 11 weeks, along with this introduction, is a chance for you and me to do it on purpose. And so if you're willing to really be that leader that does it on purpose, not for bad, but for good, so that you can see the positive impact in your immediate community, maybe in your business that affects the profitability and the bottom line, the rapport, the morale, that you see those that you're leading are actually excited to come to work and who they're working with because of the impact you make. or even beyond community and business, but as society as a whole, we want to be on purpose for good, then the On Purpose Leader podcast is for you. I'm excited about it, and we look forward to the next steps on this journey. So excited to continue our conversation on the On Purpose Leader podcast. Charles Clemons here. You might ask the question, why listen to Charles? What does he have to say about this? And yeah, when we think about this thing of leadership, John Maxwell, well-known writer, speaker, and very much at the forefront of the leadership development movement, he gave a basic definition of what leadership is, and leadership is influence. Leadership is influence. And a part of my story is watching a leader in my own home, leaders in my community, and how they've impacted and shaped me. And I'll share a bit. If you saw Ask HR podcast with Dr. Thiele Thatch, I made mention of my father, the late Reverend Charles Clemons Sr. He was a community servant leader. I watched him drive a bulldozer at a landfill, heavy machinery. He was a country man. He grew up in the South, so he knew how to work on engines and so forth. And I'd see this tall man, strong man come home, and I'd see him go and shave and clean up, put on a suit, and then he'd say, "Junior, come on." And this man that can work on machinery and heavy things all around, he would take me to the hospital. And there at the hospital, he would visit our neighbors, the elderly, the poor, people in the community. And my dad, who pastored a Methodist church, didn't see his care for the community stopping at the four walls of our church building. He served people in the neighborhood. So I remember getting knocks at the door and someone saying, "Reverend Clemons, do you have some extra food? Or do you have any money to help me make rent?" And my father, who was a hardworking man, bivocational, they say it, as a pastor who worked, he would go and give to others and help them out. And so I got to see this kind of leader growing up. I'm grateful my mother, a school teacher, an educator who valued freedom, participated in the civil rights movement with Dr. King, the March on Washington, and many other things. So the things they talked about, I got to see them be about. And those were two leaders that influenced me. But I couldn't stop right there. I loved track and field and basketball, and I remember being in school, and one of our coaches, his name was Coach Ward, a gentleman, really big gentleman, had these big hands. And Coach Ward, coach we loved, he coached track and field and cross country. And I remember times where if we had problems with transportation as a school, he would literally drive us all in his car. I remember one time there was problems with our school bus, and this gentleman who beloved in the community, he would drive the athletes back and forth in his little blue Pinto. He wrote for the local newspaper. He had an opinion on what would be helpful for us. And this gentleman happened to be of the Irish background, and he valued his culture and his people. And yet he was also broad enough in his love for people to go beyond his community to see the good in all of us. And that was one of my first cultural experiences, is seeing that people can have love for their own culture and background while having love to embrace people that are different. Which reminds me of another thing. I grew up in Long Branch, New Jersey, and shout out to my people from there. And it was a mixture of all kinds of folks, African American, Italian, Jewish, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Haitian. And when we all went to the beach, we swung, hung out, had a good time. Our coaches were from those backgrounds, the people on the PTA committee. So early on, I was immersed in a multicultural experience while simultaneously being educated and getting the values of my own culture and ancestry. And by the way, as we look at the world today, as we look at America, we are dealing with a situation where the leaders sometimes do not reflect the best interest of all our communities, of all our people. And the on purpose leader should have enough cultural competency to see that we all want to be loved and treated with respect. We all have grandparents, family, friends. And as I'm describing my background and my journey and why you should listen to me, that some of those leaders that helped to shape and put me where I am were from a variety of backgrounds, but they love Charles enough to be able to talk to you right now. I can go on a bit more. The on purpose leader and my story included times where I remember my father giving counsel and providing support to people in a process of immigration. Some individuals got literally married in our house and had a help from my parents as they were making their way to being productive citizens in this country. My hometown was the launch pad for life for me. And I would go on years later, and I spent over 2 decades working with nonprofits. Some of those nonprofits were mentoring young men. I myself received mentoring to help prepare me to go to college, get my first job, start a career. I grew up in the city. I've seen drugs. I've seen shootings. I've seen issues related to gangs. And by the way, I'm no different from those individuals, but someone took the time to help me, saw something in me to equip me to have a better life and to do the same for others. I could even say it in spiritual terms. I've been blessed. But those blessings are not just for me, they're for somebody else to pass it on. That's how it works. You know, the difference between a pond and a river, one collects and holds. Like a pond, it just collects and collects and collects, but ponds that don't have an outlet tend to collect snakes and all kinds of vipers and all kinds of things. And that's like the person that only wants to get. But a river, on the other hand, it flows, carrying water and life to other people. And so I feel I've been blessed, but not to just hold on to these things, but to pass them to someone else and to do that on purpose. So that's a part of my story, which led me to decades worth of working with nonprofits, but also decades worth in working in healthcare. And talk about a place to experience all kinds of people. Had the privilege to work on teams in the Veterans Administration systems, hospital systems that are outside of the government. And let me say this, some of the most wonderful leaders that I've had a chance to work with have been in healthcare. Um, that'll lead what's called an interdisciplinary treatment team. So in addition to the doctor, you may have nurses, you may have therapists, you may have counselors, chaplains, of which I serve as a chaplain presently. And I recall one doctor talk about an on-purpose leader. His name is Charlie Marshall. And when I was working for the veterans, we had veterans who experienced combat, men and women who served in Vietnam, World War II, Korea. And I recall we were working with this one veteran who was severely depressed, and he wouldn't talk to anybody. He literally wouldn't say a word, and he was undergoing some major treatment. And as we sat in this meeting, which was the physician, the nurses, and the wife of this great veteran, I remember Dr. Charlie Marshall, God rest his soul. He leaned in. He said, "Ma'am, we're going to do the best we can to help your husband. Can I ask you, does your husband have a favorite meal to eat or anything like that?" And she just smiled. She said, "Well, I know it's not good for him, but he really loves McDonald's cheeseburgers. Like every Saturday morning, he'd go get some McDonald's cheeseburgers, and that was like his snack." And I watched the doctor lean in, and he didn't reprimand her for nutrition, anything like that. He took a quick note, and guess what this doctor did right after that meeting? He darted right out to McDonald's. This is no plug for McDonald's here. And he came back with a bag full of cheeseburgers. Now, this veteran who served our country nobly, who experienced signs and symptoms of depression, who was getting all these medical treatments, but nothing quite hit home for him enough to open up to let others know how he was feeling. And this good doctor brought him those burgers and sat down with him. And that man, just a smile went across his face. That those burgers that he began to eat and munch on, he opened up to Dr. Marshall and he opened up to us. Now, that's an on purpose leader. Someone who was skilled in the work of medical practice, but beyond that, had compassion. He listened with empathy. He listened with curiosity to find out from the wife of the patient, the veteran, what does he like? What might put a smile on his face? And he had a greater impact in the life of that patient. And as somebody who worked for Dr. Marshall, had a greater impact in the lives of many of our patients. I worked 5 years for that doctor, and God rest his soul. I remember the funeral service that we had for him, and the place was packed. And at the end of his medical career, and even his wonderful life, his life on purpose, he did what he was called to do, and the world was a better place. And I'm privileged to share his story because a part of his story is a part of my story. And it's part of why I'm here. The journey goes on for me beyond working in healthcare with the veterans. For a number of years, I had the privilege to work with nonprofits that took me to Africa and working with leaders who very much were capable and are capable of providing resources for their people, giving them ways to sustain their ongoing efforts to serve the poor and the needy. I got to learn from those leaders resilience. How do you keep going when the problem doesn't seem to go away? How do you maintain a sense of balance and hope that what you're doing is making the difference in the life of this 10, 20, 100, or even thousands of people? Got to experience over that brief tenure seeing individuals who were so dedicated to the betterment of their people that they chose not to have ego worship, like look at me, versus let's win together and let's do and leave something that's bigger than us. Many of you may have been around, well, at least historically, you may have heard of someone by the name of Idi Amin. And that may send chills down your spine. If you're not aware of who this person, you can look him up. But he was a dictator in Uganda, and he sadly had put to death many of his political enemies. But one leader I had the privilege to work with in Africa by the name of Mr. Wilson, he was a phenomenal and is a phenomenal leader. And he worked to bring resources to his people, schools, medicine, clinics. But at one time, as a young college student, as a younger man, we'll say it that way, he was one of those ones that was rounded up by Idi Amin and their leaders. And they were actually imprisoned. And there's groups of them imprisoned because they spoke out against this leader, and they were singing songs, not unlike the civil rights movement era where they would sing songs and hymns. And they were singing, and the guards came and took the people that were in the adjacent cell all away. And to this day, no one knows where they are. There were unmarked graves found in Uganda. I know that's a chilling thing to share on this episode, but I share that because this individual who survived those circumstances had a commitment, not just presently, but from then, that he was going to live and serve his people. And as a result of it, thousands upon thousands of young people are able to eat, get an education, thrive, because he was an on purpose leader that saw his life and his future tied to his life, the life of the people of his community. Yeah. Why listen to me? I'll share also in my journeys working with healthcare and then following healthcare, working in nonprofit spaces, had the privilege to meet the children in Ukraine in 2007 before the current war. The wonderful people of Ukraine welcomed me. We were there on a project visiting orphanages, and there were families that adopted children from orphanages so that when the Soviets had left in prior times, many of those Soviet led orphanages were without support and resources. And there were individuals and even churches that adopted those orphanages to raise those children as their own. And I had the privilege to sit and eat with them. And as we were there, an effort to bring resources in the organization I formerly worked with. And one such circumstance that moved me, as we were there and hearing their stories and so forth, they invited us to a big meal. And we're surrounded by children who are just having a great time. And this one little girl takes my hand and puts her hand by my hand. And she's just amazed at this coffee complected brother and looks up to me with this big smile. And I look down at her, and we're in an orphanage now. And she takes her roll from her plate and puts it on mine. I will never forget that. And I look down at her and I smile. And a colleague who I was traveling with, his name is Fred Martin, and he's a great gentleman who does a number of things with regard to media. One of the kids takes their roll off of their plate, and puts it on his. And it was all we could do. We just kind of look at each other, and then all these children are putting their food on our plates. And we try to lighten it up. So we start gobbling up the food and gobbling up, and we're laughing. And we go outside and we're playing with the kids and we're swinging them around. There was no black and white. There was no African American, Ukrainian. We were like uncles visiting, and they were like our own kids. And when I think about the present state, even the war there, I think about, where are those kids now? Are those young boys fighting to protect their country? Are these little girls fighting alongside of them? Have they gotten away safely? I think about that in the Congo. I'm grateful to hear that peace is in the process there. I say this because wherever we go around the world, even in LA, with what's taken place recently, these are people. And how you lead and how you influence things that'll affect the lives of people, we need to be on purpose about it for the good. And I'm grateful for those leaders in these areas that have shown me examples of what an on purpose leader looks like for the good. And that's what this podcast is all about. And lastly, in sharing my story, in recent years, just as I'm sharing these things with you, I had the privilege to partner with organizations, to be a part of teams, to go and speak to business owners, companies, to help individuals find out what their core values are so that they can be in better alignment with their organization, so that together they can produce great results and be empowered at work, to be on purpose at work. I'll leave you with this last story. 1992, I arrive on the campus of Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. This is our freshman orientation. Athletes are there meeting with coaches. Students are all talking with each other and just making the rounds. And we're looking around, seeing who the classmates are. People are taking interest. And then while we're all talking, and I've shared this story before, an older gentleman, professor, just kind of quietly walks in the room. And he's unannounced. And with a loud voice, he says, "Hey, who are you?" And we all are startled. Then he says, "Why are you here? Where do you come from, and where are you going?" And with that, the students are kind of hushed. Parents are looking on almost knowingly. And then he looks around, looks us in the eye. He says, "Hey, who are you? Where are you going? Why are you here? And where do you come from?" And it's a hush. And he waits a few seconds. And then he says, "Over the next 4 years, it's our job as educators to give you the resources and tools to help you to understand, who are you? Why are you here? Where do you come from? And where you're going? And if we don't do our level best to give you those resources to find the answers, we would have failed you." But then he turned it around. He says, "But hey, if over the next 4 years you don't take the time to discover who are you, why are you here, where do you come from, and where are you going, if you don't take the time to answer those questions, then you would have failed you. And so, as I bring to close this really first episode, I'm giving you, the viewer, the listener, an opportunity to answer some of those questions. Do you know what your purpose is? Why are you here? Do you know where you've come from? Do you know where you're going? And if you get some of those answers in practical, meaningful ways, oh, you'll have a positive impact and you'll be an on purpose leader. Thank you for being here for the On Purpose Leader podcast. We hope that you would like it, share it, and subscribe to our next upcoming podcast. See you next time.